Hey everybody, it is Miss Hazard from Stonehill Middle School. I am at home in my basement studio and I'm going to be showing you a fun way to create a painting using household food, I guess, objects. And so things that I have in my pantry usually all the time are M&Ms and Skittles because my husband loves candy. I've taken the candy out of the bags and I put them into a little dish so that way I can pick them out. But we are actually going to be creating paint using the candy. The outside of the M&M and the outside of the Skittle shell is actually coated in like a food dye, and that if we soak them in water, we can get the dye off of the food and turn it into a really translucent watercolor, which is really fun. Other materials that you are going to need, you're going to need paper. You are going to need a paint tray if you have a paint tray. If you don't have a paint tray, you can just get little cups. That way you can fill them with water and the candy, or if you really just want to use like drinking cups or Dixie cups that you might have in the house. You also need crayons, you need a pencil, and you need paintbrushes. And if you don't have paintbrushes at home, you could just use Q-tips, something that you might have in the bathroom. I also have a ton of objects that are circular because I'm going to trace them to create the outline of my shapes, and I thought something that would be fun, and you don't have to do this, but is to actually make Skittles or M&Ms with Skittles or M&Ms. If you want to paint your own picture, go for it. So just watch up until the point that I make the paint and then have fun and do your own thing. I am going to start by actually taking my paper and taping off a border. You don't have to do this, but I love a nice clean border on all of my artwork. It's just something that I think looks really elegant, really nice. And I tell all my students at school to do this too and keep their borders free of fingerprints because we always want nice, clean, and neat artwork. I'm going to take a piece of masking tape and I'm just going to make a little border on my paper. I actually like to take the tape and lint it on some of my clothes first, so that way it pulls off a little bit of the lint of your clothing, and then when you peel the tape off later, it doesn't stick and it doesn't rip the paper. So I've already made 3 lines of the tape just to make this go a little bit faster, so I just taped off a little border here. Now the next step is you are going to use a bunch of those circular materials and just trace some shapes on your paper. So I'll take the paint palette before I put paint in it, make a big circle. Maybe I'll make I didn't trace that very well. Maybe I'll make another big circle over here. And I love going over the edge of my papers. I like overlapping, things like that. It always makes your art a little bit more interesting and exciting to look at. And so, trace a couple objects here. And boom. That's all you really got to do, tracing some circles. If you're doing this with a younger crowd, you could do one circle, one big M&M or one big Skittle. You don't need to have them make a ton. But if you want it to last longer, maybe have them make 2 or 3 Skittles or 2 or 3 M&Ms and push them to sit at that countertop a little bit longer and try to be a little neater. Now the next step after this is making the white M's and the white S's on the Skittles. And a fun little trick for that is using a white crayon. And so we are making paint using water, and the crayon is made out of wax. So if we draw a white M and a white S on our paper before we add any paint, when we paint, after the M's are done in the wax, the paint won't stick there, and you'll get a nice big white S or a nice big white M. And so what you're going to do is you want to make the M's and the S's on your drawings. And a really, really easy way to do that is to do bubble letters. And so I'm going to quickly show you how to make a big bubble letter on another sheet of paper. So I'm just going to use a black marker so that way you guys can actually see what I'm doing here. But I will draw an S. And you're going to do this with a pencil. I'm doing it with marker so you can see. Or I'll draw an M, very standard S or M. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to outline the S or the M. And I just actually smeared it with the marker, so please don't mind that. And please remember that the M's have feet on the bottom. So don't forget to draw the little feet, and I will show you that. Boom. So you just go around the S or the M, and then you can erase that inside line. So I already have that done, again, to make that go a little faster. So I have taken it, I've drawn 3 circles, a big one, a middle one, and then a little one, and I did 2 M's and an S on the inside. Now, my next step that I did is I actually took a white crayon and I colored in the inside of the M's and the S with a white crayon. Now let's pretend that you don't have a white crayon at home. Okay, you don't have a white crayon. You might have an old white birthday candle laying in a drawer in the kitchen, or you might have one of those old taper candles laying in the living room drawer, collecting dust for the last 5 years because you thought that you might have been using it somewhere. Your mom or dad might have thought they might use it. But those will work too because it's just plain old wax. So just coloring in your S or your M, and you want to push pretty hard. I pushed so hard I broke my crayon in half. That used to happen to me all the time when I had crayons though. I always pushed really hard on my crayons and broke them. Another thing that would work too is a white colored pencil. It's not as waxy as a crayon, but it could potentially work. And so you go over all your M's and your S's, and guess what? Now we're ready to make paint. I'm going to put this to the side. In order to make paint, you're just going to take a paint tray, or if you don't have a paint tray, take your cups, and you want to divide up your M&Ms and your S's by colors. So putting like all the yellows in one, or putting all the oranges in another cup. If you're working with a paint tray like I am, 4 or 5 M&Ms or 4 or 5 Skittles to each little well is really good. So I just put them in the well like that. And then I take the lukewarm water and I pour it in a cup that's actually easier for me to pour. And you just pour it over top, and again, lukewarm water, over top of your paint, or over top of your M&Ms and your Skittles. And you're going to let that sit there for about 4 to 5 minutes. Now, I'm not going to sit there and make you guys watch me waiting for the paint to be made. I already have it done. But what the next step is, once you've let it sit there for a little bit, I'm going to put that off to the side. The next step is just taking the M&Ms or the Skittles out. And so I just am going to grab a paper towel. And you're just going to take the M&Ms or the Skittles out of the water. And I wouldn't eat them because they've been like soaking and stuff like that. But take them out of the water, pull them to the side. And when you've done that, you will actually have homemade watercolor paints. Very fun. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually show you the painting steps. So if you are going to be painting your own version of a watercolor painting, you don't need to listen anymore. But if you're actually going to do the M&M and the Skittle painting with me, feel free to stay tuned in. I'm just going to move my camera up above me real quick. All right, so here's my workspace. I have my paint over here, and I have actually divided them up. I have my M&M paint, and then I have my Skittle paint. Now, I noticed that the M&M paint actually is a little bit more opaque because the M&M has a white candy shell and then the color on top of it. So it's actually a little bit more pastel-y looking to me, whereas the Skittle paint is a little bit more translucent. And it actually does still smell like M&Ms and Skittles, which I think is so fun. I have a spare piece of paper here. I'm just going to quickly show you the colors that it makes, so that way you can see the difference between the M&Ms and the Skittle paint. I'm actually going to move the camera a little bit closer so that way you can really see. So this is the M&M red. Kind of fun. And then this is the Skittle red. Almost identical, right? So go down the line. Blue. I don't have any blue M&M paint or Skittle paint, so I'm just going to use the purple because I don't have purple Skittle paint. You know what I mean, purple M&M paint. Oh, goodness. I do have green of both, so Skittle, M&M. The M&M actually looks a little darker. Okay, and then you have the M&M orange. And then you have the M&M Skittle. So they're actually pretty close in color. And then last but not least, I have the yellow and the yellow. And then M&M has an extra color. M&Ms have 6 colors and Skittles have 5 colors. So then M&M has brown, which actually it's a pretty neutral looking brown. So now that I did color swatches of everything, I think I am ready to paint. So I'm going to take my paper that I got ready for myself, which is right here. And I'm going to go ahead and start painting it. I'm just going to start by blocking in colors. So I'm going to use one of my bigger paint brushes, and I'm going to do my M&M first. And I really love that blue from the M&M. So I'm going to paint my big M&M blue. And just going to basically fill in the shape of that M&M circle with some blue. And you can see you actually get a pretty decent color out of the shells of the M&M and the Skittles, which I think is just so much fun. And I put wax down in these areas, so I'm still being pretty gentle about painting around the M's and the S's, but it really doesn't stick there, which is really cool. All right, wash my paintbrush, give it a dab on a paper towel. And I'll go ahead and maybe do the Skittle red with the red Skittle. Now you want to be careful because I just painted that M&M blue and I don't want to mix those paint colors. So I'm just going to really try to stick to the edge of my Skittle color right here, or my Skittle outline. If I do end up getting a little red in the blue, it just might mix a little bit, which it would just make purple, but just be a little bit careful. All right. And the last one, I love complementary colors. So I might actually do my M&M orange in this bottom corner here. Sorry, didn't go close enough to my edge there. So I'm going to do an orange M&M in this bottom corner, right next to the blue. So it looks really pretty and it pops. But you can do your M&Ms and your Skittles any way that you choose. And again, just being really careful next to that edge. Okay, now I am actually going to let this dry, and I've brought a weapon of the blow dryer, so watch out. It's going to dry my paint a little faster. I mean, you could sit here and watch the paint dry, but it sounds a little boring to me. The next step I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this brown and I'm going to put it in my background. I think it will be a nice neutral colored background. And my red was not as dry as I wanted it to be. So it is mixing a little bit, but it's okay. And so just filling in that background. And right there, if you have some little kiddos, that might be the furthest that they can go, and that's perfectly fine. And they painted a nice little picture, and we can peel the tape off and I'll show you the next step for them. Or if you want to go a little further with the kids, you could try adding and mixing some colors in. Some colors that would look good, and add some shading or some shadows. You can try to do that too. So maybe like on the orange M&M, I can go in with a little yellow and just create some highlights and maybe mix some colors. It's always something fun that you can do. Because it is watercolor paint, once it dries, it doesn't mix. You gotta mix the colors when they're wet. So it gives a little bit more of a dimension if you can mix a couple colors. And I'm just keeping the yellow pretty heavy at the top and making the orange kind of go to the bottom of my M&M. And I could even go in with a little bit of red down here and do a little shading with my paintbrush. And then I can choose to do the same thing to my M&M on the side. So maybe I'll do another layer of blue down here towards the bottom. And I can add some green here in the middle. And maybe some yellow up here at the top, which it's just gonna make green again, but it would be like almost more of like a limey green. Try to get inside those areas where the M's and the S's are. Now what's cool about watercolor paint is it does start to settle a little bit and kind of mix together on its own because the water just kind of does a little bit of the work. So it'll look a little tie-dye-ish, which I think is beautiful. And so now we'll go in and maybe with the Skittle, I'll do some more of the Skittle paint. I'll add some red to this area here. And a lot of the light in my picture is coming from this area, so maybe I'll go in with a little bit of yellow in this area. And then I'll go in with more purple. Steal some of that purple, looks a lot darker. Over here. And just mix them. Create a little, fun little painting. And I actually might go ahead and do a little bit more brown in the background. Get a little darker. Just add a second coat of that brown. Kind of fun. All right, I'm gonna clean up some of those areas where I might have got a little bit of water on my M's or my S's. And all you have to do is just take your paintbrush or a Q-tip, get a little clean water on it, and go over that and just clean it up. It'll come right off the wax, which is really cool. I'm gonna go ahead and blow dry my picture really quickly and show you the next step. So my paint did mix a little bit, but I'm just gonna blot that off. And it's not as quite as dry as I want, so I'm actually gonna go to a previous picture that I painted and show you the next step on that painting because you guys don't wanna wait for me to finish this. All right, so I have one that I just started earlier, just testing out the colors and such. And so the next step that you would do is you would peel off the tape. Be really careful not to rip it. Let me get this paint out of the way. And I always pull the tape to the side, so you don't want to rip your painting, so just pull the tape to the side. So if it does rip a little bit of your paper, it rips off to the edge and it doesn't actually rip the painting that you created. And I am ripping my paper pretty good. All right. So the next thing that I would do is I would just take a marker, nice simple marker, and I would go ahead and just outline your M&Ms and your Skittles with a nice black line. Just like that. And if you want, you could also go around your M's that you've created. I'm doing this pretty fast for you. And your S's. And the last thing that you always want to do is you always want to sign your artwork. So right down in the bottom right hand corner, just do a signature. And you'll get a really nice little print using just candy that you might have found in your cabinet or your pantry. If you have any questions or you want to know any more details about the project, please feel free to reach out to me. Hope you guys have a great day. Have fun creating.